got some West Coast fans of
We're live.
How's your microphone in that distance?
We're about to find out.
Right.
Okay, so
Outdoor voice.
if Amy is out there watching while we're just now live, she could shoot me a text and tell me if my projection is sufficient.
That's all.
We got our last participant coming. Whoop.
I'll just come on in. I'm gonna go get coffee first.
Hello. Okay, somebody else talk.
Hi, Amy.
Good to see everyone.
Can you hear me?
How's that working? Is it picking up at all?
Okay, great. Then we're in business, right?
No. Wendy Carr says hello from Texas.
That's very good.
Okay. All right. Somebody can hear us.
We've got one more guest coming in, and that blue chair. Yeah. Okay, Keelan, you can drag the camera just a little bit closer. Good, perfect. Okay, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Luckily, we've got a helper from the distillery
You know what?
behind the camera.
You can get it.
Yeah. My wife says hello and thank you for knowing how to find your angle. Are we good?
You've done a slide bit of filming.
Yeah, I've done it.
Just finger two.
Okay, so it is 7 o'clock. Thanks for everybody coming. Welcome back to the Victorian Barroom. I know you haven't seen a lot of us lately. We are still alive. We have not been absent because we haven't been working. We've actually been very busy making, on the one hand, things that you're going to see. Some things that are going to be a good thing for the channel. If you've been with us for any length of time, you've heard about this mysterious absinthe film that has been in production since before this channel existed. More than 3 years ago, we started filming a documentary about Alan Bishop's research into absinthe that was produced in Switzerland County, Indiana. If you've seen our stuff with Vinoge, they're in Switzerland County. During the 1830s, and that film is in the can. The documentary is in the can. It's on the same computer that we are streaming to you from tonight, and we are hoping that we get some time while we're in this present location so that my co-producer, Alan Bishop, who's on his way, can take a look and sign off on it, and then we're going to do probably two different this is your chair. Okay. Then we're going to probably do two different premiere events, and then it'll be available online. This was a big partnership with a lot of different organizations, so you'll be able to see it a number of different ways. We will be coming back to you with our regular content with 2 Christmas episodes this year. That's how we're going to launch back into that. Everybody relates to Victorians at Christmas, thanks to Charles Dickens, Queen Victoria, and Prince Albert. We will be partnering with Theobald Homestead in Switzerland County, Indiana. They're kind of Vinoge's partner. They're their neighbor up there in Switzerland County, and we've got some good ideas. We're going to do our usual kind of mini Christmas movie that we bring to you, and then we'll have a really delicious but easy Christmas drink that you can have on your own or share with your guests, and then we'll just get back at it. We've been having some good ideas this weekend. Other thing we've been busy with is just a lot of life stuff. You know, there's been a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good changes for us, and putting the pieces in place so that I can get away for more than a week to spend time at Mount Vernon here in Alexandria, Virginia, making whiskey the old way at George Washington's Mount Vernon Distillery with Steve Bashore, who's right here. He is the head distiller and director of historic trades at Mount Vernon. He was kind enough to invite us out here to join him for this production. Also with us today, we've got Alan Bishop, the alchemist of the Black Forest of Indiana, master distiller at Spirits of French Lick, and you can also catch him on One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute right here on YouTube. We've got Adin Pemberton, cider maker. He won't let me state it any higher than that, even though I consider him higher than that. And extra special guest this evening. We didn't find out about this, thanks to Steve making the introduction until about 4 o'clock tonight. This is Marc Meltonville. He is a consultant food and drink historian. You've worked for Royal
Palaces in England for 25 years and now branched out all over the world.
Right. Royal Palaces in England for 25 years and has now branched out all over the world. It's a great group to have. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing this week, what we're going to continue to be doing this week. And then all of you guys out there, let us know what you want to hear about, ask us your questions, and we'll just kind of use that to guide the conversation.
Yeah, well, we've been spending time in the reconstructed distillery of Mount Vernon, which is built on the original location, running 5 wood-fired pot stills, making rye whiskey, the original mash bill that was done at Mount Vernon in the late 1790s. So Alan has been out a few years before to work with us. Mark has been on over a decade of these runs, Mark.
Unfortunately, yes.
And of course, Brian came some years ago and did some training and work with us, and it's great to have Adin out here. So it's just been a very collaborative time the last 2 days, a lot of learning, a lot of hard work, but I think it's going pretty well.
Yeah, it's going extremely well. I think a really interesting group of people in the distillery. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of informational exchange happening in the distillery. I learned more in 10 minutes about building fires from him today than I learned the entire time I've been distilling my whole life. So apparently I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
There are many ways to do it. Just
Right.
I have another way that I use.
Yes. A way that seems to work better. So I'm going to go with it.
Every time Mark starts talking, I wish I had my notepad with me.
Oh, I just got to download. I'm going to have to get a notepad and just download all the things from this past week that have happened. So it's been a really special thing. And having Eric Wolf in the distillery was phenomenal as well.
And what's his distillery?
So Stolen Wolf.
Stolen Wolf. Yeah, Eric from Stolen Wolf Distillery here in Pennsylvania. They're doing some really great rye whiskeys.
There in Pennsylvania.
We're somewhere other than Kentucky right now. So-
2 states north.
Right, 2 states north.
I think they're just east-westish.
Yeah, we're east-westish. Rye whiskey is something that I haven't really addressed a whole lot on the channel, just because I know there's so much complexity to it and so much history behind it. I didn't want to screw it up, and I was still trying to wrap my mind around it, basically. So we've done a little bit, but Eric at Stolen Wolf is one of those people kind of keeping the tradition alive.
Yeah, and of course his mentor being Big Stole, last distiller at Nickers. You know, that's a big deal for sure. So working with him was great, and
we had another special visitor today who's worked with Mount Vernon, Joe Dangler.
yep.
Smith Bowman, master distiller of 35 years. He was 80 years old now, but we had a visit from him.
Well, it's great. It's great working with Steve too, because Steve does a thing where he'll come up to you and be like, such and such is going to be here in a little while, and they know about this thing, and you need to go talk to them.
Yeah.
So, it's been incredible, and the whiskey that you guys are making here at Mount Vernon is phenomenal. The stuff that's coming off the stills is beautiful. The fermentations are beautiful. They're really, really, really high end. You guys should be very, very proud. Mount Vernon is, to me, is one of those places we were kind of discussing what it means in general for as a distiller to come here. It's one of those places I think that any distiller that really considers themselves a distiller, this is like to get invited to come do this. This should be like the very top of the class to get to come do this in the United States. So, how many distillers get to say, hey, at least in theory, we're working for George Washington. They're actually working for Steve Bashore.
Yeah.
I'm a far cry from Washington by height and other measures too. One thing about the building is it's brought a lot of people together over the years.
Absolutely.
That's one thing that's nice is I remember when I met Mark years ago, he was here for some other work and wanted to see the mill initially, the water mill.
Yeah.
And then his expertise in drink over the years has really helped, like the fires, but other items too. So I think you guys all see it from a different perspective.
I just got a call from what you showed me around the mill. I'd done some research and lecturing at Mount Vernon, had no inkling about a distillery at all. And I get this call from this guy over there saying, "Do you want to come and have a go at making whiskey?" So I don't know anything about that. To which you said, "No, we got guys can show you that, but you run ovens with wood fires and understand about where heat goes, how you want it. Could we add the knowledge?" It's all about what you've been saying. It's that sharing. Every time we come here, we meet new people, we talk, we go away and think, "I hadn't thought of that."
Yes.
It's a good new set of questions that I need to now work on. If that distillery has done one thing, as you say, it's brought together probably hundreds of people who might not have met. It's a brilliant project.
Absolutely. Well, we had an opportunity this week too to try some really great whiskeys.
Yes.
Some really special whiskey.
Yes, that one evening.
Can we say the name of the fellow who shared that?
Kurt.
Yeah, his name is Kurt.
His name's Kurt.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
He's not here.
You can't afford the whiskey he's had.
No.
You can't afford
And
the
his
last name.
email is.
Right. No, he had some very antique whiskey. It was 1906, 1908, 1911, and 1916. Ryes and bourbons, and we were all there late at the distillery, and actually got to taste these things from prior to Prohibition, when everything just got blown up, and it was hard to comprehend. It was hard to appreciate the magnitude of what you were doing while you were doing it. I think.
We thought we were getting to taste one.
Yeah.
And then he said, I have another. And I thought he would just bring it in so we could look at it.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, you guys want to taste it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're asking the wrong group of guys if you don't want to taste
Yeah,
it.
right now.
For sure. And he goes, I have another.
Right.
And he's talking to Steve. He goes, I have another.
Yeah, he brought him out. I thought we were just going to get to look at him.
Right.
You know?
I was more than happy just to hold it in my hand.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
there it is.
Very generous, very generous.
Absolutely. And a great guy, too. He was in at the distillery helping out and, walking around. And it was crazy to see those whiskeys because I remember when those were found, I remember reading the article about that collection.
The melon.
Yeah, the melon collection.
Yeah.
And then reading our friend Laura's stuff on that as well, but never ever actually thinking I'd get to see them and taste them.
Yeah.
I have no idea. So
Well, that's another great thing about the distillery is that it doesn't. We got the whole spectrum of folks out there. We've got really rich people. We've got not so rich people who work in history. But we're all there together doing this craft together. We're all dirty. We're all sweaty. We're all smoky. But we all love the same things and come together with the same passion.
and we're all learning.
Yeah,
There's
we're all
nobody coming in there that knows everything about it. There's always something else to pick up from everything. So it's a great place. And how often does a distiller or someone who's interested in distilling ever get a chance to run a wood fire pot still in the United States? Not to mention you're doing it in the footsteps of Anderson and Washington. It's pretty special. So I've learned a ton here. Even with Steve and the way that he's cutting the spirits on the stills, that's stuff that I'm taking back with me in my head, and it's stuff that I'll implement for certain projects. So.
I just learned something new as well. About the whiskey you said you got to try. I got here a day late.
You did? Yes.
I should have got in Saturday.
Right.
That's what I've learned. That's what I'm going to take away from this evening.
We all love reenactment, so we'll try to have a reenactment.
Oh, we'll try and do it again.
Yeah. I mean, I'll make a bottle that says 1908 on it.
Oh, that'll do me. I'm happy with that. I'm easily fooled.
Right. Right. It seems to be doing the trick, so it'll work. It'll work fine. So, one of the things I thought was really cool this week was you guys got to run a set of stills, and you figured out through making a mistake that how to correct it the next day, right? And then you mastered that today, and
On a hotter day.
Yeah, on a hotter day.
Today was tough.
I've just gotten word from the producers. Be sure to, if we all face the camera while we talk, even though we're talking to each other.
I don't want to because then I can see my belly.
Well, you got to look past it.
Nah, you
Look
can't.
over.
I just ate like 10 pounds of shrimp. It ain't happening.
Do we have any questions out there yet? You see?
Nothing yet.
Okay.
Bourbon Turntable says Bashore for president.
Yes, I'll do that. That can
I
fix it.
pay him regularly.
Right.
Well, I think what happened today, which was interesting from an operational perspective, is that control and fire is critical to what's happening in that still. And it got warm today for this time of year. And those stills, if they get up a distillate coming off a certain temperature, we have real problems. So based on what maybe you two can talk about what happened, what you learned, how you handled it today.
Well, also, as we get into that, shout out to Aiden. How many stills have you ever run?
Today was my third time running a still by myself.
Kept that thing cool and steady, and it wouldn't stop. We were ready to go home. Yeah, and it was delicious.
Yeah. So today or yesterday, I was running Elizabeth, who's one of the stills that shares a chimney with Anne directly next to her, and she got a little too hot, too fast, and we had to kind of act fast and hurry and get that temperature back down. And thanks to Steve's quick help with that and just manipulating the fire, we were able to rescue that run. But having learned from that, and Marc's incredible information and advice on setting the fire correctly today, especially on a hot day, really. Today I ran Anne, Elizabeth's sister, and she ran beautifully today. The distillate we got off of it tasted great. The temperature control was really steady. And all of that is just from learning from all these great minds here. As probably the newest distiller here, having great minds to glean off of. It's been incredible.
I think something Steve and I came up with, it was in March last run, was the one thing you have to get in your head every day is today is not yesterday.
Yes.
You learned yesterday, but today is not yesterday. Deal with what today throws at you, and it could be cold, it could be hot, it could be windy.
And that was one of the great conversations that you and I had this morning. So, and I ramble on about distillation on multiple platforms, obviously, but I always talk about how in a modern pot still distillery, everything affects a pot still. Barometric pressure affects pot still, the wind phases affect pot still, the mood you're in, etc. Same thing with the fires under the pot still and the furnaces and the way that they run. So now you've added another complicating factor to an already complicated, we'll just call it an art form here.
Yeah.
And it can be a little mind-boggling, you know, and getting to do a little bit more of the work this time than I did the last time. Doing those cuts in that environment with smoke and everything else, and having a little bit of a sinus thing going on, and having to worry about things getting hot and having to run back and forth, it's a lot. It's a lot, Steve. Kudos to you, buddy.
Well, we always say back over in England when we're working on brewing or distilling or even cooking, I can teach you the process. I cannot teach you the craft. That will come with time. And you will discover things I didn't know because that didn't happen to me.
Right. Well, one thing I want to say real quick about the distillery in general is I think that Mount Vernon is obviously a very special place for distillers. I told Steve and these guys earlier, like this is church for me to get to come to a place like this, right, and get away from work. And next week when I go back to work, although I love my distillery, I will wish I was in the smoke-filled distillery with all the wood and all the stuff and the birds chirping outside, you know, all that stuff. So, but Mount Vernon's not just a historic distillery, and I think in the coming years, with the quality of whiskey that they are currently making, you're going to see Mount Vernon go from a distillery that is considered a historic distillery, which is interesting from a historic perspective, to a distillery where people are really going to want to track down the whiskey from Mount Vernon because of the quality of it on top of the historic production methodology. I think that you're at the point where you guys have created a house character for your whiskey that is very worthwhile, very, very interesting, and I think that people will enjoy it. I think that you'll start to see people buying it specifically for the whiskey as opposed to, hey, I went to George Washington Mount Vernon and I bought George Washington whiskey.
Yeah, like a novelty.
Yeah. That's going to change. And then you're going to have to make it more expensive. And I'm not going to be allowed to come here anymore because I'm going to have to work to be able to buy the bottle. And then I can't afford gas. And it's just going to be a cascading problem from there.
What do you have to say about that process, Steve?
I have nothing to do with the price points that are set.
Fair enough.
And,
I'm just trying.
yeah.
Just trying.
Well, I think it's been a bit of a curve in the imperfection of the taste over the last 6-7 years. Of course, our friend Lisa Wicker helped us tremendously from 2016 on.
Absolutely.
When Dave Pickerel stepped away in recent months, our friend Bill Hockett came in here
Yes.
and did some good stuff for us. Remember Bill last
Bill.
November, learned a
Big
lot,
help, big
changes that helped that.
Absolutely great distillery.
And I think we just run the stills better.
I think so.
And so all those things combined. And we've also played around with different grain varietals, the Rosen rye, other things that we've done, which is unique. But I think it's more just we've gotten better at running the building.
And I've said this many times, what you guys do here is much more akin to what a home hobby distiller would be doing in a lot of ways. So what you've done with all those great minds that you've had to come through here through the years, and they're still coming through here, is you picked everyone's brain. You found the best possible scenarios for you and what you were doing in order to make the best possible whiskey you can. Not meaning that you didn't mess up a few here and there.
Oh, certainly,
for sure.
certainly,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I call the early ones the humility bottles.
Yes.
That where you thought, oh, great, and you taste it now compared to.
Which is good. I mean, if we were tasting the stuff 10 years ago and thinking it was better, it would not be a good place.
Yeah, we wouldn't be on this podcast.
No, so we were proud of what we did because we did it with the skills we had, but those skills have improved.
Somebody blinded me once on an early jar that I made and didn't tell me it was mine. And I was like, what is this trash?
Yeah.
And they're like, you gave me that years ago. Okay.
What we got from questions?
Okay, so Davina Duckworth, she's got a couple questions for you. The first one is, any new projects at the Mount Vernon Distillery?
Yeah, we're going to be releasing a couple special whiskeys over the next 6 months. Double oak whiskey and a Madeira finished rye. And we also have a brandy project that kind of got hatched this week, talking with Adin and Alan and we got to work you into the discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Because we think we're going to make some changes in our apple brandy and some things we want to do next year. So the other nice thing about the brandies is there's an opportunity with the 2026 coming up, the American Revolution anniversary, that the Washington Lafayette relationship is so close that we can release some things under a Washington Lafayette label.
That's tough.
So-
Yeah.
That's
so
fantastic.
I think with the historical tie, we always do this. All these upcoming dates are going to be interesting to see if we can tie special releases.
Yeah.
Oh, and also 2026, there will be a George Washington bourbon, please.
Oh, very good.
It'll be 5 years old next month.
That next to Kentucky, and those are fighting words, aren't they?
Well, that one is not one relates to Washington.
Or is it because you're on this side of the state, or this side of the country as opposed to in Kentucky?
Yeah,
well,
Would it be different?
maybe if we get to taste it first.
Yeah.
Well, there is tomorrow. But I learned a long time ago, don't mention in Kentucky that Kentucky was once part of Virginia.
Well, we
That
did.
was awesome.
Oh.
It's okay because we didn't find it sufficient. We fixed it.
You did fix it.
All right, calm down, Brian. Calm down, Brian.
Wow.
We'll be on the floor in a minute.
I've done those shows.
What else does Davina have for us?
So the second part of Davina Duckworth's question was, I'm curious whether they use some kind of chemical analysis to test old whiskey, and how do they know the process is going well? Visual inspection, or do they have tests to make sure the batch is good?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, there's modern ways people do tests, the labs that helps distilleries where you can really get a readout. What we're doing is, all sensory really.
Yeah.
And then we tried to have several people taste it because everybody's palate's a little different. And Mark's very good at, as we run that still down, detecting changes and helping us make cuts, which we did a lot of in March.
Yeah.
I think the easy way to explain that is that, the early distillers, they knew how everything worked, maybe not necessarily why everything worked. And now distillers are educated enough that from a historic point of view, we're not running gas chromatography to figure out everything that's in that whiskey, but now we know how and why most things work. And then the quality of that comes into play. That's the character of your whiskey that you're making. As a traditional distiller, it's based on the human experience and human sensory perception. And one of the other beautiful things here is that with pot still distillation, even in a modern distillery, there is no consistency. And now you're in an old time distillery distilling with wood fires, as we said, all those variables. You manage your consistency over time by blending, and that's going to rely on you and your team blending barrels going into the future and having sensory analysis and having the huge group of very talented friends that you have to be able to put that in front of and say yes, no, this much, that much, etc. And to me, that's much more valuable than any other form of testing out there, I think.
And I think part of the curiosity here might be, was there old whiskey that was analyzed? And I think the answer to that is no.
It's long consumed.
Yeah, long consumed. Yeah. But the recipe was left over.
Yeah, it was actually not written down, the recipe, in any way, like, here's the recipe. It was, the ledgers exist, so they were able to pull data out of that showing when grain left the watermill and went into the distillery. They broke all those entries out and gave them a ratio.
Right.
Did you have any, I'm trying to think of some of the work I've done with historic beers. Our biggest problem has always been that I've got an end product, which in beer is usually measured in large barrels, hogsheads. It tells you this, they get a mash bill, this much grain makes this much beer. But what it doesn't tell me is how much liquor and even how much water goes in first.
Yeah.
What's their soak up rate? Usually about a third. What's the boil off rate? About 10% and so on. It's taken years to find a couple of people, one in the 16th century, one in the 18th century, actually do that calculation. And they keep coming out with beers at about 5 to 3. That's helped us massively.
Yep.
So 5 gallons of liquor makes about 3 gallons of beer, which we could possibly then work through with how many bottles you're getting out of it. But as we just said earlier, every day is different. And it's really different going backwards, because if you spoke to the originals, they go, yeah, well, today we made 12 gallons, tomorrow we make 5. And
In the modern view, like economics, they expect
and it doesn't work like that.
I remember one. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, well,
Just
thinking about England, there was a great show on the BBC about Victorian bakers.
Oh yeah.
And they traced it through the whole Victorian period. So it's like the 1830s when things were kind of like they were in the 18th century, all the way into the late Victorian period, which is kind of modern.
Yeah.
But they were making the point that even in a place the size of England, the variance in the grain from place to place influence how the bread
makes so much difference.
Yeah. And so we're looking at that in whiskey and beer too, right?
And the one that everyone forgets that I always point out when I'm giving lectures is your first ingredient is water. What's your water like? Is it iron rich? Is it calcium rich? Is it hard? Is it soft? And when we're working on projects, that's the first thing we'll analyze. The last one we took water from an aquifer of the beer we wanted to reproduce, but we couldn't do it there. And then I had a number of sites across the UK that we'd earmarked that we might have produced it in. A hard one, an iron rich one. And then we settled on a water that was pH the same, calcium the same. All we had to do was put an inline filter in to remove a tiny, under 1% trace chlorine.
Wow.
And so once you build the water, then I start up from there.
Right. That's
Very
neat.
cool.
Yeah, so there's two really good questions here. And though she says we've already answered her question,
That's right.
maybe it'd be worth answering this in more detail. Heather T asked, she goes, is Mount Vernon whiskey available now?
Now we'll say Heather Torrey is the biggest supporter of this channel. She contributes more than anybody else, and we really appreciate that, Heather. And on to the question.
Well, right now, we're currently available for sale at Mount Vernon only, but we do ship within the state of Virginia and to Washington, D.C. But we are working with a couple of companies in Washington to have a small distribution plan for next year, hopefully, where we could get to a few other states where the whiskey would be available, where you could get it shipped direct to consumer.
I think, Heather, you're in New York, right? Is New York on that?
Oh, I think so.
Okay, so New York might actually be a possibility.
Yeah.
And as a further question, that just out of curiosity, with the you guys are running typically once in the spring, once in the fall, most of the time.
Right.
What kind of capacities, as far as gallons, are you generally looking at for the season?
We usually make about 1,100 proof gallons a year. Occasionally, we throw in a third run. So the most we made in the year, I think, was close to 1,600 because we did 2 brandy runs. And where we are now, 15 years in, we have a number of barrels aging. We're still very small, but we're at a point now that's where we can release some specials. So there's a lot in the pipeline of aged spirit. It's just keeping up with the unaged.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So this is a very good question here. This is Alan's wife, Kim.
I didn't do it.
How much wood do you go through in a day's time operating the distillery?
Depends on the weather.
Oh boy.
We had 9 cords delivered 2 or 3 weeks ago. We've probably gone through already maybe 2, I'd say.
Yeah.
A windy day, we will use more wood than a hot day. A cold day, we'll use more wood than a windy day. Some stills, depending on their position in the room, will be slightly higher because their draw is better, so they get through wood quicker. You can roughly work out what you might use, but there's no way of saying what a daily consumption is, unless you weighed it as you were putting it in.
And Randolph's busy enough. Cutting
Yeah.
wood. But it's interesting in the ledger because we use a lot of wood now. In 1 month in 1799, the distillery went through 51 cords of wood.
Wow.
And they were feeding the boiler too. We do have electrically heated boiler, which is not accurate to 18th century, but fire code meant we had to have that. So
They already had 5 fireboxes in the building.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And then just because I know that we all have geek speak and we all have farm speak and ag speak, kind of speak to how much a quart of wood is, right? As far as size goes.
Well, it depends, I guess, on how you measure it.
Right.
I mean,
Typically, like in the Midwest, we'd say three rig equals 1 quart.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea if you burn wood at home or something like that. Better than that. A lot of people probably are like, I don't know what quart is. What's a quart?
Yeah, we have one more truckload coming, which the guys that cut wood don't know about yet. We'll let them work through those
So
2
big old
piles.
triaxle pulls up in there. Yeah, it'll be a good day.
But you saw today the team effort it takes to get it going.
Oh, for every guy on the still opening the firebox, there's 5 guys behind making it happen. Without that, it does not work. Do you get with the recipes over here, or we get certainly our brew and distill recipes for 17th, 18th century, they will always write down the estimated cost of what they call coals, which is just the firebox, because that is important to them, because that helps you work out the price point. So they're already worried that the grain costs this, you need profit, you've got to pay your guys, and you're going to be spending 3 shillings on wood. So it's very important.
That's interesting. I don't know that.
Well, at Mount Vernon in 1799, Washington actually is thinking of leasing the mill and distillery to James Anderson, the Scottish farm manager. One of the things they can't settle on is the cost of the wood.
Yeah, there we are.
Because Washington will help with that, but he doesn't want to not lose all his wood in that building.
So we forget that bringing a cartload of wood is no different to us picking up an electric bill now. It's just the same.
Yeah,
Right?
that's interesting.
Okay, yes, so there's another question here. Captain Marco asks,
Hey, Cat Marco.
what makes rye whiskey so enjoyable?
It's a big question. What makes
Yeah.
rye whiskey so enjoyable? Could somebody bring us the Solomon Scott and we can work on that?
I'm
I was going to throw the offensive Hoosier thing of because it's not bourbon, but oh, better let it go.
I noticed there's 3 glasses and 5 of us. I'm a disappointed man.
What if we get some more coke? I think he's gonna hook us up. Well, let's talk first about what makes rye whiskey so enjoyable. So let's talk a little bit about the difference in what you get from rye versus bourbon, since bourbon is such a big thing right now.
I'm gonna let you go.
Well, I feel like I don't know.
Looking at me.
Well, I feel like you all are a little bit more educated. I don't know. I like to talk about it a lot.
Well, I tend to think that rye has mostly been a misunderstood spirit in a lot of ways in the modern United States for sure. I think that there's this idea that rye is big and spicy and heavy and should have some black pepper on it and those sort of things. And for me, I don't think that that's what rye always was. I think rye tends to have some very floral elements. It has some really floral elements. Lavender, jasmine sometimes can come across. You can get some really nice candy notes and graham cracker notes. I think that overall rye can drink better as a younger whiskey than what bourbon can in particular. And I think the beauty of that is rye is one of the few American whiskey styles that you can consider to be grain forward in a positive way, right? No one's going to be offended if the rye whiskey tastes like rye bread. So. I went, your turn.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I thought that was neat too because, and I've heard what my favorite episode of my whiskey den was the complaining episode. When they decided to complain for an hour about what gets on their nerves about whiskey, and one of them was, I think it was Mike, said that. Yeah, he was talking about, when people say they like rye, but they've only tasted MGP rye.
Right.
Which is fine. I mean, if you like, you may drink what you like to drink, but there's a lot more out there. And we were tasting some nicely aged stuff. I think it's like 5.5 years old.
Yeah, 5.5 and 6.
Yeah, the other night, it's like you talk about rye being spicy, but this was floral,
Very floral.
smooth, creamy, and it rolled over the back of your throat just like smooth, creamy caramel.
Right. And to be fair, and all absolute due respect to MGP, because in the state of Indiana, they kept the lights on for other distillers to come in the future. 95.5 is a very specific style of rye. It was originally intended to be a blending component. It was never really intended to be a sole whiskey of its own accord, right? It was a very flavorful thing. It was going to be used in small amounts for blending. Same thing with Kentucky. When Pennsylvania sort of got, unfortunately, out of the rye business because of Prohibition, and therefore after Prohibition, Kentucky started making rye because there was a market for it, but it was 51% rye. That's what people tend to think of when they think rye nowadays. They're thinking 95.5 or 51%. So many other versions of rye out there, and so many other rye style, different varieties of rye now. Obviously, Rosen rye in Pennsylvania. We're looking for some of the other varieties out there now to try to bring in, and mixing rye grains with various other grains produces an entirely different style. So,
Well, let's also bring this back to, we're talking about all these specific styles and these are the rules and that's what it is and on and on and on. But the whole reason I started this channel, feel free to use the paper cup too. We got glasses coming there. We also got paper cups. But the whole reason I started this channel actually wasn't to talk about liquor specifically, but to talk about agriculture because I was into orchards. Alan's between the distillery project and Love Grove and Alan's apple brandy. refocused my life onto apple orchards, and that being what I wanted to do. It's like, well, how do I actually talk to people about this? And I decided to talk to people on the end product, rather than the beginning, which is distilling. But one way around is saying, anytime you're looking at a regional distilled spirit, you're looking at an expression of the agriculture that exists in that area, not just a good idea somebody had.
Right.
And I think we see it so much as a luxury now. It's like, well, that's just a good idea. Somebody came up with a great recipe. It's an expression of the agriculture in the
I
area.
think you're right. In this part of Northern Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, rye was plentiful and cheap.
Right.
So it's not a mystery like, oh, they were shooting for this spicy taste. No, it was there.
It was there.
Didn't go to the bread oven,
Right.
and then went to the still.
Right.
What else we got there?
Well, a J. Kaz says, I recently read that rye whiskey was historically floral, whereas now it's typically described as spicy. Is this a difference in the grain to terrier distillation methods?
So that's a really good question, and some of it can be grain related. Some of it is also related to the fact that, especially in the United States, a lot of the rye that is harvested has a little bit of garlic seed in it, and that can make things a little bit spicier as well. But also the understanding of running stills and how stills work, and the fact that there are volatiles on rye, because rye is a big, heavy grain that you don't necessarily want in that distillate, and not calling out many distillers out there. But if you run the still too close or too cold when you're running rye whiskey, you'll actually imbue the rye with some of those volatiles you don't want, and they come off as spicy, as opposed to coming off as floral, or coming off as sort of more rounded.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it just literally becomes distillation fault, because with industrialization and the growth of huge distilleries, there can be a little bit of a lack of quality over time, or quality that slips over time. And you got to remember that we went through a generation with prohibition where all the distillers either got out of the game or died off, and so a lot of that was lost in the mix.
Well, we were talking earlier.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about variants and stuff like that. The emphasis these days on consistency.
Yeah.
That can lead to consistently mediocre.
Right.
And so it's like, yeah, you're getting something better than the bad batches, but you're also not getting the really good batches. When that comes out. Or the really good years. Each year should be different.
But our problem as historic distillers is the fact that it's really difficult to market inconsistency.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if I get a bottle of something that we've done and you like it and you want to buy your uncle a bottle of it, you want it to taste like the one you bought, and that's the one thing I can't guarantee.
Right.
And that's why we don't work in the big world.
But that's now the beauty too of the craft distilleries, because even though you're blending, we blend 30 barrels at a time to get our batches. You can go back through our batches; they don't always taste the same. But the great thing is we're dealing with a generation of drinkers who don't necessarily care that it doesn't taste exactly the same at the same time, as long as it is consistently good. That's what they're happy with. So, they're not the traditional, I want the same exact bottle that I had last week. Sort of thing.
Good.
But this is actually kind of interestingly enough, Steve, this Solomon Scott is actually my take on the recipe from Mount Vernon.
60% rye.
Yep, and with Victory malt instead of standard distillery.
Would you speak a little bit about what the differences are there with what may have been run here?
And let me point out too, what we're drinking is the Solomon Scott, which Alan made. Add spirits of French lick. There's a number of ways you can get this delivered to your door, right?
Yes. So MASH Networks, I think, delivers to 40 plus states in the United States, and they carry all of our products. And we do have distribution in multiple states and Canada as well. And you can buy this as a single barrel product too. So
It's pretty good to get a rye indicator.
right? Yeah, I got 100% rye in there one time. I was real happy with
That's
myself. So
It's one of the best I've ever had. So I just want to know
Very nice.
what you were what we were using and how you can get it. And now on with.
So I think that what I would say about this rye in particular is that really that mash bill was a tribute to what was happening at this distillery. This is my modern take on what was happening at this distillery with a Hoosier spin on it, because I have to Hoosier things up for everybody, right? So I think that the big difference here is you do get some of the floral stuff, but I also have an emphasis on using some weird yeast strains that pull through some interesting, what I think of interesting characters almost like some poured down candy that comes across, and it's kind of the house character of our whiskeys in general. I wanted a rye that could stand up against any bourbon out there, and hopefully try to convince some of the bourbon guys to switch into the rye game.
Yeah.
So
It's very nice.
thank you. And that's a 5-year. Ironically, that the rye mash bill that you guys use here, we found references to similar rye mash bills like that in the Ohio Valley in the early 1800s. So there was some variation in there, but there was some style that was related to that style of mash bill. But the weird note we found on it was in southern Ohio, southern Indiana, and northern Kentucky, they were aging it in hickory barrels.
Huh.
So,
Wow.
and you got to imagine that this probably tastes a little bit like Lay's barbecue potato chips. I haven't tried it yet, but it's
Is
coming.
that your next?
Oh, it's
endeavor?
I've got hickory staves laid down.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yes, a Trevor Simpson asks, is Mount Vernon participating in the revival of any old distilling grains for their whiskeys?
Yeah, we have done that during COVID when we could not make large runs. We made 2 heirloom grain variety runs using rosin rye, thanks to Laura Fields, some Bloody Butcher grain, some orange Creole corn, and then we use bare barley.
Very cool.
And bare barley goes back to Northern Europe, very old times.
It's our oldest
And
version.
it's
Really?
still growing.
I mean, the word is beer. It means
Yeah.
barm. It's the root word to a barm where you put it. It doesn't actually even mean barley. It's people just look at it and go, that's what you make beer from.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it is still grown on the Orkney Islands.
Okay, and
Bill,
Canada.
And in Canada.
Uh,
So through one of my good friends, Justin Cherry, who's an 18th century baker, who is in London right now getting ushered into the Bakers Guild.
Yeah, he asked to meet me. He said, do you want to do lunch? I said, I'm in Virginia.
But we'll see him next
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
But he found a source out in the Northwest United States for the bare barley.
Mm.
And Sebastian, who was here today from Epiphany Malt, from
Yeah.
North Carolina, he malted that for us. So that was a great project. Those barrels are aging. They'll be 2 years old next month.
It's a difficult malt.
It was.
It's difficult to grow. It's a really good example of why we don't grow it anymore, because it's tall, like older wheat. So a small windy day will take half an acre out for you. So you lose. The last project where we wanted bare only, we were delayed by 1 year because the wind got up and it took out half a field.
That happens.
And that happens, and that makes you understand why we don't do that now.
And agronomically, just an interesting note. You know, that's where your 6-row distillers malts all come from.
Mm.
And I found references. I think I talked to you guys about this before, of it being grown and made into malt commercially in Eastern Tennessee in the 1830s. So you don't really see it leave Tennessee. It's all being sold locally, but that's the first place I've seen that in the United States. So.
We've got a new small farm in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland. They've just taken stock of a load of seed and they want to start growing it more in the middle of the country where it's less windy, so we might be getting a better source of beer. But that's, you know, he contacted me a week or so ago. So until you've got 2 years down the line, I'm not going to be able to say whether we've got any or not.
Right.
They'll grow it first for seed next year and then see what we get.
Right.
So, Bourbon Turntable asks, what is George Washington's rye mash bill?
What is George
Good.
Washington's rye?
Yeah, good.
Can you tell us?
60% rye, a little over 30% corn, the remainder being malted barley.
Great historical detective work.
Well, that team there was led by Dennis Pogue at the time. He was vice president for preservation and an archaeologist himself, and Esther White, who was the head archaeologist. So they dug into the records.
Mousset de Venogy.
Oh, Monsieur Vinoge, hello.
Do you think that rye is underestimated?
I do.
Yeah.
And I think the comeback has been nice the last 15 years to see it reestablished.
I think as a craft distiller, I would say this. I think that there is a lot of people won't agree with this, but I've said this many times on all my platforms. There is a bourbon bubble coming because there's not enough diversity in it, and there are too many clones. And as we just discussed earlier, rye still has levity left in it. Rye might really be, certainly is a better candidate, in my opinion, than white whiskey to be considered a very serious American spirit
Mm.
that people can really get into if they like really heavy, flavorful stuff. And I think there's still a lot of play in rye whiskey, and that's not bourbon. It's to say that
Well, no,
bourbon's gotten
and
so big.
yeah, I don't think it knocks it at all. And as a Kentuckian, I'll say, and I hope it's not a bad thing for me to stay here, but I love bourbon. I love bourbon for what it is. I like to drink it. I don't have a ton of money, and all that. I don't like other people coming and turning my state and what we do into a Disneyland version of itself.
Absolutely.
And so I like it when I'm around here and you all got rye to taste somebody else's, what somebody else does. It's like, that's what we do. It's not something to be watered down and overly commercialized and stuff like that. That's an expression of what happens there. I like it when something else happens someplace else.
Do you think bourbon then is going the way of IPAs in the craft brewing? I think that it's just saturated with a very similar flavor range, and people just aren't.
Flavor range, marketing, colors.
Yeah.
There's so many people using the same consultants that all recommend the exact same things.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how anyone finds a new bourbon
Right.
short of through a program like this.
Yeah.
Right. And getting to know the distillers through something like this and then wanting to try their stuff. But I think that the bourbon industry has relied so long on this idea that the foreign markets were going to open up to it. And I think the way that population growth has trended in the markets they were planning on, I don't think that it exists. And I think that you'll end up in a situation very similar to what they did with the Whiskey Trust, where they'll just start dumping bourbon very cheap onto the U.S. market. And if I were starting a new craft distillery right now, I might make a bourbon. I wouldn't put much stock in being a bourbon distiller. I think rye is a better bet.
Well, you were telling us some interesting stories about gin. Do you think that has any?
Well, I mean, certainly, I don't know what it's like over here, but the gin market in Britain is probably saturated now. Mostly because people are just searching for yet another flavor, which is not the route I'd go down. I want a clean, clear gin.
Right.
I want to know how you drink it. Do you want it botanical? Do you want it smooth? Do you want to mix it? But no, the vast majority are sort of making it cucumber flavored, filtered flavored, and every one of those that I look at, sort of raspberry with a banana belt bent around it. And I'm thinking, yeah, but if I want to mix something like that, the flavors into my gin, I want to do it cocktail style. I don't want it in the spirit, and so
You don't want you'll play gin.
yeah,
Right.
so,
You'll play gin.
well, I can't quite see why that's going down there, but it's successful marketing. It's looking for a youth market with different flavors, different way around. But I still think we have although we have what looks like saturation, we don't, because what you need is clean, clear spirits that suit you. I mean, we're talking about, do you like this, do you like that? That's the beauty of working in food and drink, historic or not. If I was a chair maker and missed one leg out, you'll bring it back and say, this doesn't work, this chair.
Right.
If I don't like a spirit, it's just because I don't like it, but others do.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this.
I think gin is in a similar place in the United States, but what happens here in the United States, or what I hope happens in the United States, is that people won't look at the gimmicky stuff, but what they'll look at is the more historical stuff and try to do something with it. Rye, for example, of course, there's Genevieve out there, but rye is a great base spirit for a gin.
Yeah.
And even using low wines, macerating in the low wines, and then pulling that off the still. You can have a gin that's for the rye whiskey drinker out there. So,
Anybody else?
So Jay Kaz asks, if rye isn't going to be the main grain, but a secondary grain, or even the third grain in the mash bill, what other grains does it pair well with? What grains does it not pair well with?
I was waiting for somebody else to talk. I think rye and corn do work well together. I think that rye, if I'm going to have corn in a rye whiskey, I don't typically want it to be a very flavorful corn. I just want it as alcohol. So, number 2, yellow deck corn, because you just want that sweetness in the alcohol. I think rye malt is, in my opinion, rye malt is one of the most exciting things out there. I love 100% rye malt whiskeys because you get stone fruit peach, stone fruit apricot, that sort of thing. The one grain that I think works extremely well with rye that does not get utilized very often in the United States at all is oats. Because oats provide mouth flavor, and they also provide contrast and flavor bridging. And if you want to find spices kind of like snickerdoodle cookies, you use oats and rye together, and you get some really neat stuff coming out of that. So
I've messed up big time with I've been using multi-oats for the
Yeah.
last 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Multi-oats are really interesting, but are much more temperature critical with
Yep.
mashing. I made 45 gallons of porridge.
It gets
One day,
Yep.
and that takes a lot of hiding around the hedges and around where we live.
Amen. Yeah, I like.
Why are all the livestock at that end of the path?
We've got some very happy pheasants.
Back, yes. Yeah, we toasted oats several times,
Mhm.
and that works extremely well too. So
I think I just know now that I don't understand oats yet. There's a whole new raft of discovery on those because they really don't like hot water.
low temperatures.
Huh.
Low temperatures.
Low temperatures, which means you have to make everything completely, which is about what we're saying. Let's discover, let's
Yep.
explore,
Let's figure it out.
and fully admit that we'll get it wrong a few
Right.
times.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's the exciting part.
Yeah.
Then you have the chance to get it right.
Yeah.
So Amy actually asked,
Oh.
or rather comments, and this is a brilliant one. Since we are unlikely to get Mark back again anytime soon, I'd like to hear a little more from him about his work and what else folks can find out.
It's a great question.
What do I do? My project that's coming to an end at the moment, which was funded by a university in Dublin, was the mainstay of the project was to look at nutrition for people in the past, specifically the 16th century. We all know that everyone at Mount Vernon did a job, we know what those jobs were. The whole point of this project is to find out where did they get that energy from. So we know they're doing it. They're going out, they're plowing fields, they're threshing, they're working in a mill. You need calories. We need calories today to work in that distillery. So where is that calorific input coming from? And so my part was to build a 16th century, a Tudor brewery to run period grains through period equipment to then have almost all of it sent for analysis. Bill was asking earlier about modern analysis. Yeah, most of my stuff goes not into people, but up to labs across 5 university linked project. And they're looking at the proteins, the carbohydrates. We've got a group up in the University of Durham. They're looking at the oxygen isotopes in there and see how the boils and the mashing and the fermenting is changing what you get from it. And so that's been the last project. The next one, I'm hoping we're going to run some more Tudor beers. I really would like, but everything I do is grant funded, so there's no guarantee it's going to happen. But if it happens, I'm very, very keen on the idea of using residue analysis, which is archaeological findings, archaeobotanical bits. We've got that information to have a look at the beers in brackets that they were brewing for Roman soldiers.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a lot of people want to come and play with that.
Yeah.
And so what you have is all the residue of the grains. We've got percentages. We've got an idea of what herbs were in there to give it the what we now call the group flavors. But someone's got to tick a box on that and say, yes, guys, you can build a Roman distillery. Roman brewery.
That's exciting.
They build the Roman brewery, and then I build the Roman distillery.
Yeah, and that would be nice and contentious because it may have happened.
Yep, absolutely. And Groot's one of those things that should be distilled anyways. It's delicious.
Groot's something that doesn't appear very much in England. Groot is very much mainland Europe, especially Flanders, what we think of the Low Country brewing traditions in what is now the Netherlands and Belgium, but weren't called that then.
It is a weird little place in Indiana somewhere.
I can
Let's-
say
let's-
from personal experience, Alan makes a fine group.
Well, let's define group.
Yeah, oh God.
Yeah.
Groot is the bittering herb content in a beer or ale, because we get terrible problems of what you should call it. And we settled last year at a conference on the fact that if you make a malted drink, call it beer. Get over it. We know what we're talking about. It's a Roman beer, an Egyptian beer, a colonial beer. Just use the word.
So you're talking about, we think of hops across the board, but
Groot is,
for them,
it's all of the other herbs.
Yeah, all the
Although
other herbs,
technically, if you go up into the area that will become Germany, their Groot herb is hops. That's where it comes from. So it's a mixture. In England, it tends to be a herb called ale cost or costmary. For most of Europe, it's bog myrtle or sweet gale. Gale is an old word for fermentation. We use gale. So the clues are out there in the names and so on. The difficulty is it's a tax thing in Europe. In Europe, they tax the group. The thing that Alan's talking about, the brewery. So that's quite well documented because anything that a government taxes, they write down.
Right.
We never tax the herbage in England. We tax the finished beer. So really, no one seems to care what you're
Right.
as long as we get their money at the end.
Right.
We're usually all just a little drunk enough that it doesn't matter what we put in it.
Yeah.
This, you know, this wasn't historically in there, but here's a handful of something weird.
What else we got there?
Well, no new questions at this time, but Trevor Simpson asks, I got to try an awesome gin. No, he doesn't ask, he comments.
Right.
I got to try an awesome gin from New Zealand, I believe made with a whey-based alcohol.
Oh yeah. They're awesome.
There's starting to be a lot more of those in the U.S. now too. That's as a consultant, I get a lot of calls about people that are interested in
It's
working
got a
with that.
reasonably good acidic
Yeah.
quality to it. The yeast doesn't mind it. There's a beer made in England at the moment with the whey byproduct of Stilton.
Oh, really?
There's a Stilton beer. You either like it or you don't. There
That's
is no middle ground.
Yeah.
I like it, but yeah, there's quite a lot of work with whey now.
No, not historically.
No.
It does not doing that with you. It's all look.
It doesn't figure historically.
Well, we're getting close to an hour. I think we've heard the least from Steve and Aiden.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
Well, I will tell you this. So I, for better or worse, it's all Alan's fault that I make cider. Because Alan's apple brandy is so good. I was like, man, this is
Changed lives.
fantastic, and I would love to learn how to distill this. And I thought, well, I better make a good cider first. And I've been kind of stuck on just perfecting better and better cider for the last 5 years, and just now started to dabble into distilling. And getting to talk to Steve about apple brandy projects. I'm really excited about what you're interested in doing and what we might be able to do together, because I think it could be really cool with just riffing on each other and having ideas. I think it's going to be cool.
It's a direction we need to move in.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think it's
and
gonna be really
that,
cool.
We've done some decent apple brandies, but I think our peach has been much better over the years.
Mm.
And so I think it's time to make brandy next year anyway.
Yeah.
But let's make it better,
Yeah, absolutely.
including different coopers that will eventually go in. I think.
Mm.
But what we talked about is the direction we fleshed out.
Sometimes history teaches us a lesson, and I had one, because we expect something wonderful or massive or magical out of these recipes that we pull out. And I was working on a project for the very well-known site Stonehenge, where we got a lot of information about those. We were working on an exhibition which was reconstructing the food again from the archaeology. And there were some trace elements of drinks, and those drinks fermented in what seemed to be pottery jars, had apple and honey showing up, and grain, real malted barley. So we had the stoneware jars done up, and we fermented in the jars. And of course, as you do that, you get more and more excited about trying this 4,000-year-old drink. And then when you sip it, you think, well, what do you expect? It tastes like cider, because it is. And everyone goes, tastes like cheap cider. So you don't always get the miracle you're after.
Oh God! Hopefully, it wasn't as bad as that stuff that comes in 3-liter bottles.
Pretty much.
Oh no!
It was a very simple, not very well made.
Yeah, when you can get a 3-liter bottle of cider from a gas station in England, you're like, I kind of want to try that, but also,
But 4,000 years ago,
Yeah, it's the
that was
4,000.
that's
Yeah, and once we finish sort of going, oh, is that it? And laughing, the idea is, well, of course that's it. It's a fermented drink. It tastes quite fine.
Mhm.
We just created in our head some idea it was going to be completely different.
Yeah.
And why is it?
It's a utilitarian thing. It didn't kill them, and they, you drank enough and felt pretty good. So.
the cider is really part of it.
Anyone needs any fermenting jars?
Yeah.
It's still there.
Can you ship them over?
yeah, right. Can we give it a go?
Yeah.
Guys, any final thoughts?
Just that this whole thing was awesome. This was a great experience, and it was awesome getting to meet people that I've talked to for years. I never got to meet in person, and getting to meet so many new people as part of this thing, and work as a team on historic distilling in a way that people I don't think still yet realize just how special that this distillery is that you have. There's nothing really like this out there otherwise. Even Locust Grove, we were not really distilling there, we were mashing in.
Yeah, we weren't licensed to distill. We had to send it off someplace else. Here we're going through the whole process.
There are a few more coming, but they weren't owned by George Washington.
Right.
No.
It's not the same, so.
Well, I've said for years, over the years, I've said this to Mark, that this Mount Vernon brings people together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it did in the 18th century and the 19th. It was
Still doing it
it's
now.
still doing it today.
Yeah.
What was it Washington called? Hangabouts?
We're definitely not.
Well,
Oh,
we
yeah.
called the people let us know idlers, and I don't
Idlers.
think
Yeah.
anybody today was idling about.
Yeah.
It was a busy day. We got a lot done, and the nice thing is we get to do it again
Yeah, yeah.
and the more after that.
Yeah.
And the more after
So people always ask me to sum up my job, and I always say, well, the hours are pretty good. It's just some of the minutes suck.
On the note of the long hours, I do think as a visitor and getting to have this great experience, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the Mount Vernon team that's
Yeah.
here, that are cleaning the stills out and that are making sure that basically we get to do the fun stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
this is so cool that we get to do the fun stuff, but they're doing a lot of backbreaking labor that we aren't, thankfully. But I think they should get a definite kudos because they are working really hard and that is a huge component to
Absolutely.
being able to do this. So, cheers to the Mount Vernon staff out there.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you.
good crew, very good crew.
So it's a very good crew.
Mark?
Yes, please.
Any final thoughts?
No, I'm going to have to echo what Steve said. I know the 10 years coming back to the boards, when I'm coming back to the project, I'm looking forward to making the whiskey, but I'm more looking forward to the fact that I know over these few weeks that people like you are going to come in, someone else is coming in next week. I'm going to meet new people, new ideas, and people are going to ask questions that we've never thought about before.
Mhm.
So rather than teach, I'm going to go away thinking, I'd never thought of that. Let's see if we can start unpicking that.
Yeah.
Why did that happen? I don't know. We're going to get a day where something's going to go weird on all the stills, one of the stills, and we're just going to sit back and think, okay, what was the weather like? What happened? Were we?
We'll never get it.
And we might not get it, but it's that continuous discovery, that just continuous learning. The day I don't learn something new, I stop.
Right. Well, for me, I'm never happier than I'm doing period work, real work.
Yeah.
It's like I got this history degree only to find out that my favorite things to do are chop wood, haul wood, and stack wood. Right. Which you get to do in a distillery. And so I did not expect for historic distilling to be a part of my life. It was just because I happened to be the program director at Locust Grove at the right time, and I had an interest in it, and I got to come out here, and Steve taught me to make whiskey 7 years ago. And now we're back, and it's amazing, and to just be able to be a part of that real process and the magic where it feels like magic when you mash in 3 barrels one day, you work a few more days, and then you're putting that in the still, and that's what's coming out as whiskey. And your hands are on the project the whole time, and you feel purposeful. It's like we were so hung up on convenience and speed and all this. It's like when you actually have your hands on a process in a historic context like that, you feel purposeful. I think that's lacking in life a lot of times these days.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a
We
fantastic.
learned, like Mark said, we learn a lot from everybody who comes.
Oh, yeah.
A lot. So it's been good. And tomorrow brings another day of challenges.
Absolutely.
We'll be up at 6, on the job at 8. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is the Victorian Barroom again. We will see you all again in early December with some Christmas fun. And if Alan likes the Absinthe film, then you'll be seeing that coming out probably early in the new year too. So thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys soon.
Cheers.
Come on,
Come on, Alan.